everyone for coming out, and at this time I would like to pass the mic to Dr. Kathy Murphy, our superintendent, your superintendent.
Thank you so much. I actually backed into the parking spot, so in case it gets too heated, I'll run and I'm headed out pretty straight. But I'm so grateful that you're here. I know that you are very passionate tonight about what we're going to talk about, and I respect that. I'm not sure that much gets much more personal to us than having conversations about our children and talking about our homes and talking about our communities. So let me just say to you, I respect all of that. And let me say that I respect the passion that you have about this whole process. I know that there are concerns. I am here just to share a bit with you, but I'm also here to hear you. I've said this in every meeting, and for those of you who are making the circuit with us, you'll hear so much of the same conversation. But I do not have a plan. So I'm not out just doing this exercise of futility here with some plan to immediately go to my office in just a few weeks, open my drawer because I've got the plan, and there's no plan. There is no plan because I want to be completely open and objective. I want to hear you, and I want you to share with me. I want to say this before we get started, and usually somewhere in the course of this I feel the need to say this, and so I'm going to say it up front. I have the greatest respect for Andy Craig. The fact that I have not pulled out his plan to study and to endorse does not mean that he did not do good work in front of me. I have all respect. But I have not biased myself by even looking at that plan. Now, you may say, well, you should have already looked. There was a lot of work that went into that, and kind of naive of you not to do that. But I haven't. I have not chosen to take a look at that plan, and so I am completely open, completely unbiased. One of the things that we are starting to hear are some common threads in conversation. I'll just bet we'll hear some of those same conversations from you tonight. And it's those things that we're hoping that we can respect and honor as we start crafting and drafting and putting our plan for rezoning together. So the first obvious question is, why in the world are we even doing this? Why do we need to do rezoning? We love our school, we love our community, all is good, and why are you upsetting the apple cart? Well, there really are two reasons why we're doing this. The first is it's something that we need to do as a school district. And we need to do it, and I'm going to use my cheat notes just so I can get it straight. So let me tell you why we're doing this, and let me give you the numbers to give you that evidence. Bluff Park Elementary School. Raise your hand if you have a child with us at Bluff Park Elementary School. Kind of thought that. And thank you for being here. So when we look at the data, we have what's called maximum capacity of a school, and we have optimal capacity of the school. Optimal capacity is the most desired. It's optimal. That's a good spot to be. You certainly don't want to get up above that. Maximum capacity means we're there. There's not another seat in the house to accommodate those students. So let me tell you where we are at Bluff Park. I'll do so for Green Valley, for Gwynn, for Simmons, and obviously the feeder program to Hoover High School. So if you want to jot this down or you take mental notes. So Bluff Park, the maximum capacity is 655 students. The optimal capacity, which is the most desired, would be no more than 589 students. And our enrollment currently is around 638. That means that we're at 97.4% maximum capacity, and we're at 108.3 of our optimal capacity. We're well over where we optimally should be based on looking at Bluff Park and those numbers. How does that compare to Deer Valley? How many do we have representing Deer Valley? You have a child in our Deer Valley community? Green Valley. Green Valley. Okay, so Green Valley, maximum capacity is 761. Optimal capacity is 684 students, again the best. And we have an enrollment of 550, which puts us at 72.3% of our maximum capacity and 80.4% of the optimal capacity. Gwen, how many of you have children with us in Gwen? 708 is maximum capacity, 637 is optimal capacity. The percent of maximum capacity based on the students, 581 at Gwen right now, puts us at 82.1% of maximum capacity and 91.2% of what we would consider optimal capacity. So if we were to just take, and Simmons Middle School, we have parents here for Simmons, our maximum capacity would be 1,269 students. Optimal would be 1,142. We have 800 students enrolled at Simmons, which puts us at 63% of maximum capacity and 70.1% of optimal capacity. And so just from that information itself, you see that there's a great deal of disparity between the optimal capacities in our school, where Bluff Park is at 108%, again, comparing elementary to middle school, but middle school Simmons at 70% capacity. Perhaps the most profound example of that would be to take a look at our Bluff Park at 108, and then we have Trace Crossings at about 55% capacity, optimal capacity. So 55% versus 108 for one of our schools in this feeder zone. So the reason for rezoning is to try to provide a fair distribution of our students and to utilize our facilities. We do not want some of our facilities underutilized and others stressed to the max. So as it relates to why are we doing this, why is Hoover Schools doing this, it's based on a distribution of our students, and it's based on utilization of space. And then there's a secondary reason why we're looking at rezoning, and that is the Department of Justice. The Department of Justice is in this process with us because as a school district, when we withdrew from Jefferson County was under the desegregation court order. When we withdrew from Jefferson County, we didn't withdraw from the desegregation court order. We remained under the desegregation court order. So that a few times. And so we are still under the watchful eye, if you will, of the Department of Justice. We are seeking what's called unitary status. Unitary status, once we are able to acquire that, and I say this with all due respect, then we can slide the Department of Justice out of our business, so to speak. I will say this about the Department of Justice: they have in no way been anything other than cordial and interactive with us. They have not taken a long finger and shook it in our face to tell us what you're going to do, you're not going to do, it's our way or no way. It's been none of that. It's a very positive, very interactive conversation and dialogue that happens every time they come to our school district. They were last in our school district about 2 weeks ago now, and when we met with them at that time, it became obvious that in order for us to get the timeliness of this process down, that we really needed to kick it into a little higher gear. I don't mean to say that from the end of we want to act in haste, we want to hurry up and get this done. It's none of that, but we will be meeting with Judge Hakala, who is the judge who is looking at this from the Department of Justice review. And there will be a December meeting with Judge Hakala, and then I believe there's another meeting first of the year, January, February. And so we're very hopeful to have as much of our homework done so that we can get that before the court as quickly as we can. So we've actually gone out to our faculties. I was at Bluff Park with their faculty today. We put some of our faculty meetings together, just rather than going out to 14, 17 different schools. We put some of those together so that we could have fewer meetings, but give all of our teachers, all of our support staff an opportunity to come to the table and to share the topics. Really great meeting at Bluff Park today. And we've also quickened our pace with our last community meeting. Our last community meeting will be Thursday night It'll be at the Metropolitan Church of God, just off of Acton, very near our central office. So if your thought is, wow, y'all kicked this thing up a little quicker and a little bit faster, we have, and we've done that for a purpose, and that is to try to make sure that if there's any waiting that goes on as it relates to this, it's not on our part, it'll be on the part of us waiting for the courts, not the courts waiting on us. So why are we pushing to make this happen by academic year 16-17? Well, what some of our community have said to me is, if this is something we're going to do, if this is something we have to do, please listen to us, hear the community, but let's get this thing done. There's something about things just kind of hanging over your head. We're going to do it, we're not going to do it, we're going to do it this year, no, hang on, we're not going to do it this year. The uncertainty of that, I think, creates a lot of apprehension, and it just feels unfair. And I think the position that I'm hearing from our community is, if this is something we have to do, need to do, hear us, please, but let's get this done. Because if you think about this, in the spring, for example, we select cheerleaders and athletic teams, and there's so many things that are going to happen in short order that we can't possibly wait until May or June or July and think we can make this thing happen for academic year 16-17. I don't think that it's in our best interest for us to drag this process through an additional year. Again, we know that this is something we need to do, have to do, and that we're going to do. And so the timeliness of this and the fairness to our community, I think, is let's get with it and let's not have the courts wait on us. There are 6 green factors that I really am going to stop talking here a little bit, let me hear you. But there are 6 green factors that I want you to be aware of that the Department of Justice is looking at. They're looking at transportation. Now, when I talk about the Department of Justice is concerned and interested in all children in our school district, but they are predominantly interested in our African American students and making sure that in no shape, form, or fashion are our African American students being treated unfairly, differently, or less than. So let's take transportation. I am proud of the fact that we chose to take off the table fee-based transportation. I think it was the right decision. And it had absolutely nothing to do with the Department of Justice. Now, the Department of Justice was glad that we did that. But we did that because we felt like it was in the best interest of our school district, it was in the best interest of our children. And by the way, the children that would be most impacted by a fee-based transportation system were going to be our children who are least able to afford that cost. So, I've used this example everywhere I go. It's just, the only way I know how to say it. Welcome to free public education, but we're going to charge you to get on the bus to get there. And it just seemed to be disconnected. And so we took that off the table. The Department of Justice was glad we did it. We didn't do it for their benefit. We did it because we felt it was the right thing to do for our children, for the school district. I'm very hopeful that we will be able to acquire partial unitary status as a result of our transportation fees. We are not transporting minority children a longer distance than we are any other children. So we don't see any disparities as it relates to transportation. Extracurricular activities, that's an area that the Department of Justice is looking at. We don't have clubs and organizations where only minority children can participate, or only Caucasian children can participate, or Asian children. Our clubs and organizations embrace all children. And because of that, I don't have any concerns about us excluding one population of children in clubs and organizations. So I'm hoping, again, a second factor, that of extracurricular, we can acquire partial unitary status. And then facilities. The Hoover City Board of Education takes care of its facilities. Now, certainly you can walk in our schools and go, that wall needs a little bit of paint, or, that toilet needs attention, or, go to near our homes, there's always something if you own a building or grounds that needs attention. But we're very proud of our schools, and we're very proud of how we take care of our facilities. And we don't send minority children, as it would relate to the Department of Justice, to one of our poorer schools, not taking care of schools. And so again, I have have no concerns that we're being very fair as it relates to how we take care of our facilities and where all of our children are allowed to go to school. I think we're going to be okay on those 3 of 6 green factors. Where we're going to have a bit more of a struggle as it relates to the percentage of minority faculties and staff in our school district. And so what the Department of Justice is going to want us to have is they're going to want us to have a good plan for how we're going to recruit quality teachers regardless of color. The Department of Justice has no intent, and Kathy Murphy will not be a party of hiring anybody just based on color, white, black, or otherwise. We're going to get the very best teachers we can to teach our children regardless of color, but the Department of Justice wants us to give thought to how might we recruit more quality minority teachers just as we recruit, period, quality teachers in our school districts. They also want to make sure that all of our children can participate in all of those academic areas, whether it's the International Baccalaureate Program or is it the dual enrollment programs, the advanced placement. Do all of our children have fair opportunities to be a part of that? And the answer to that is yes, they do. But when you look at the numbers, there's not a fair representation of minority students who are choosing to take those classes. And so we need to have some plan for how we're encouraging and promoting and supporting all children, including our minority children, to take the challenge and to step up to some of those academic opportunities and experiences that frankly they may be missing out on. So those are the green factors. Green comes from a lawsuit. If you really want to be bored, go out and read that lawsuit. Green factors just simply makes reference to the lawsuit was a gentleman by the name of Green. And by the way, we're going to post some of that on our resources site. So if you're interested in looking at some things on unitary status or interested in those green factors, we'll post some things up tomorrow that I think might clarify some of that even further for you. Let's go into a couple of these slides and if we could. Go for it and I'll back you up if you don't mind. So here's where you can give us some feedback in addition to being here tonight. You might also want to go to rezoning at hoover.k12.al.us. Give us feedback online. We're interested in that. Some of you will be very comfortable to come to the mic. Others may not be. But we want you to have a forum that you're comfortable with. And then under the resources, www.hooverrezoning.com. We're going to start dropping, that's where we'll put the unitary status, the green factors, and some other things that might support you, researchers who want to read a little bit more and understand that process. So that information will be out there. So the timeline for where we are. This week, Thursday night, we finished the last of our community meetings. I'm out meeting with all of our faculties. I think it would be extremely not prudent of me to come out to the communities and say to our communities, share with us, talk to us, engage with us, but not take my time to go out to every school and say, hey, this is about you too, and I want you to have a forum. And so we're very busy doing just that, giving all of our schools an opportunity to talk to us and share with us. We are working with the Department of Justice on a program that's called GIS, Geographic Information System. Our city has Geographic Information System, and they very graciously have been supporting us. Jason just went and had some training with one of our people with the city, and I believe Ron Dotson, Dr. Dotson is learning that system. And here's what's really cool and neat about the Geographic Information System. We can, for example, look at the Bluff Park zoning area and say to ourselves, okay, what if these two streets weren't zoned to Bluff Park? How would that impact the population? Because GIS not only tells us where children live on that street, they tell us which school they attend on, which school they're zoned to. They also tell us if that child's black or white or Asian or whatever the ethnicity of that child. We know that. So we can manipulate the polygon, if you will, and create so that we can start to look at how shifts might occur. It's a really neat tool, a very neat instrument that will save us a whole lot of time of taking old maps and doing the sort of counting system. So we're working on that. We're going to have a small group, 2 or 3 representatives from each school come to a smaller meeting with me once we start to put this diagram, plat, rezoning plan together and give those representatives from each of our schools and communities a chance to sit in a smaller group and look at that with us. All of our principals will sit at the table with us and look at that plan, and then we will bring that plan back out to you in 5 more community meetings, right back out. And by the way, Jeff, Pastor Jeff, where is Jeff? Thank y'all so much for allowing us to use the church. And so, if willing, we'll bring that meeting. But we're very grateful to the church. Thank you. And so we'll bring that back out to you. And I would say it this way. It won't be etched in stone, but we won't be wiping it off the page to start all over again either. So we're going to invest good time, good energy. We're going to be thoughtful and sensitive. We're going to be systematic about this process. We're going to craft the very best plan we can. We're going to bring it back to you. We're going to show it to you. I'm just going to say this up front. In God's house, not everybody's going to be happy. And I know that. Anytime you're talking about change, it's difficult. I can assure you that when this process is over, not everyone in this room is going to be happy about that. And we own that. We understand that. But we also understand that we cannot continue to carry on as it currently is. But I need to also say this to you. This is not necessarily one of those things that, 2 years from now we're going to have to come back and rezone, or 3 years. I don't know. Because we continue to build in Hoover. There's no moratorium on no more building in Hoover, right? And nor do we want that. But we really do as a school. Okay, so I stand corrected. But what we understand is that as growth happens, hey, it impacts the school district. And so we need to be very thoughtful about how growth impacts us. Right now we're having a lot of growth on the west side of our city, right? This is the side that's overcrowded, if you will. And that shift may happen. And maybe growth happens on the other side of town. I don't know. I can't predict that. But I can tell you this, and this will not happen in Hoover. So don't start throwing tomatoes or whatever you had the hymnals. But the point is this. As populations change, I can't tell you that in 3 years we're not going to come back and have the same conversation. Or 5 years. Or I don't know. And so, I can pretend like this is one and done and we're going to get a remedy, this will all be fixed, and we're never going to have to come have this conversation again. As buildings are built, as single homes, single dwellings are built, as apartment complexes, multi-purpose complexes are built, it's going to affect us. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. We are impacted by the growth of our city. And where that growth is significantly impacts us. And can we accommodate that? Those are the things that we have to constantly be looking at and engaged and a part of. Well, I've talked way too much. Maybe other things that we need to share. But let's back up and let's talk about having you come and share with us now. If you would, when you come up to the mic, just tell us who you are. We'll turn this one around. Just tell us who you are. If you want to tell us that you have a child in XYZ school, we're interested in that. Maybe you're a parent, maybe you're a community leader, maybe you're just an interested citizen. Share that with us if you would. And then share your question, or share your thought, or whatever information you want to share with us, or whatever you want to ask. I can't tell you tonight that I can tell you tonight, I cannot answer all your questions yet. Because this is not crafted. This is the process. And so you may ask me some questions that I can't answer, and I will. You may ask me some questions that I'm just going to have to pitch out to a later date. We'll look at that. I hear you. We're sensitive to it. And we'll work on it with time. But I have 2 note takers on the front row. And so they're taking notes. And what you say to us is important tonight. If it was not important, I'd be home watching TV, exercising, or doing something fun. So But by the way, it's fun to be with you too, so thank you. Please feel free at this point in time to come to the mic and, somebody's got to break the ice, so some brave soul come on up and share with us your question and or your thoughts. Hi.
I guess I'll break the ice. I'm Kurt Posey. My children go to Bluff Park, and the question I want to ask you, and you may not be able to answer it, is two things. How much do you know about the build-out in the city? And number two, are you in the room as an advocate for our children saying no when they want to rezone, when they want to build this or add this other part of the property to the city?
Am I in the room with the city to have those conversations?
Yes, ma'am, to say that's not a good idea for our schools. Our schools are across the board at 80, 90, 100%.
Yeah.
Are you there to say no?
So let me tell you that I advocate on every level for our school, and that I have had a very positive and interactive conversation on lots of levels in the city since I've been here. And I'm hopeful that the city will allow us to continue to come to the table and hear those critical conversations, and I will be your advocate. I get it. I understand that growth, I understand that annexation all impacts the school district, and we have to be able to accommodate the children who move here and whose homes or complexes are built here.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you. She's going to clean up behind her.
I'm sorry. I'm really clear here. Are you in the room with planning and zoning, yes or no?
I am not in the room with planning and zoning.
What do we have to do to get you in it?
Probably just ask the city for us to have a seat at that table, and I'm perfectly willing to be sitting in that room and advocating
Because
for
we
us.
need somebody from the school system in there. We need somebody to
Thank
say
you.
no and limit it. If not, I would be glad to go and say no to everything. It's not okay. This is not okay. I don't understand why we have to worry about maximum and optimize and all this other stuff. We shouldn't have to worry about that. They just need to stop building. So we need to get you in that room.
Yes, and I will reach out and ask to be able to be a part of conversations as it relates to building, zoning, and annexation. Thank you. I appreciate it, though. You know, when you want an answer, you want an answer, and I respect your pushing for it. Hi.
I'm Steve Brooks. I have 2 kids in Bluff Park, Illinois, and 2 more that will be enrolled, hopefully, in Bluff Park, Illinois, in the coming years. I think a couple points, I guess. I think it's significant the amount of participation from
Largest
Bluff Park.
group we've had, 4 meetings.
It speaks to the level of involvement and how important it is for Bluff Park to the community. The elementary school is a significant part of the community. Black Park is, I guess you haven't lived here for long, but I don't know how much you know, it's a fairly stable community. The average home is probably 30 plus years old. There's not a lot of growth. I think even the numbers at Bluff Park Elementary speak to that. I think the average enrollment in each class is around 108. The largest is 122, and the smallest is 90. And if you break that down even further, the largest class is the 4th grade, which is moving out here in the next couple of years. The smallest 2 classes are kindergarten first. So there's even maybe some negative growth there at Bluff Park Elementary. How does that enter into the equation when you look at drawing these lines and Bluff Park Elementary entering into that equation?
Well, what we know is that when we look at our schools and we look at the percentage of optimal population throughout the school district, it would be about 84%. So if you took our students and spread them out over our schools. So not that we'll force an exact 84% at every school, but that's sort of a benchmark. That's a starting spot for us to look at what the percentage might look like at each of our schools. One thing that I am not interested in is I am not interested in getting away from community schools. I'm committed to community schools. And having said that, let me explain, and then you may want to unclap, but maybe not. We're not interested in picking up enclaves of children and moving them out of the district. In other words, there's no reason to take the little side street right beside Bluff Park and move those kids to a school some distance away. So what is desirable, and the design would be to create a contiguous area around that school, which is that community, for those children to go to that school. What that would mean is the further out from the central location of that school you might be, you would be more likely to be perhaps zoned off to be moved. In other words, no pockets of children being picked up outside in the center of. We want a contiguous area, a community around that school, and those children go to that school.
When you look at Bluff Park, it is kind of one big neighborhood. There's no really easy way to draw lines. How does that enter into the equation as far as if you draw down the street, kids on this side of the street are going to Bluff Park, and if you're going to Glen, where in other parts of Hoover, you have entire neighborhoods that you can break away. But Bluff Park isn't like that. It's kind of one big neighborhood. You get to any one neighborhood from any other neighborhood in Bluff Park.
Well, and again, I guess the best explanation I can offer is those that are more likely to be pulled away from the school would be those on the outer perimeter of that contiguous area. Is it desirable to have half the street going to one school and half the other? No. Certainly wouldn't stand here to suggest that that would never ever happen. I don't want to promise anything that I have to come back and, eat crow, so I want to be very careful in answering that. No, that wouldn't happen.
Last time we went through this, there was mention of bringing up outside sources, consultants to help with this. Is that going to be done with this at all, or is this going to be all you're doing?
Well, it's not all I'm doing, and thus why we're here tonight is to let it be about us and hearing you all. It's why we'll craft this and bring it back out to us. It's why we'll have a smaller group of people at the table from this community and other communities to put their eyes on it. It's why all principals will be sitting down to look at it. So in no shape, form, or fashion is this my plan, I'm crafting it, and I'm coming to deliver it, and I'm the anointed one with all the answers. I'm not smart enough to figure this out. I need the input of this community.
One more point I'd just like to make is that, and I mentioned Bluff Park is very stable area. Other parts of Hoover are growing rapidly. If the underlying cause of the rezoning is growth, I don't think anybody else in this room thinks that those stable communities should have to pay the price for the growing communities as well.
Already have 108% capacity here, optimal capacity. Let me say this at the risk of I'm certainly not trying to incite you. I'm trying to be absolutely forthright and as transparent as I can be. There's absolutely no way in my estimation through this process that Bluff Park will not be impacted. Okay, so that's just the honest response. I could say otherwise, we could all hold hands and sing kumbaya and leave and be happy. I'm telling you the truth. As you look at the rezoning process, there's absolutely no way, as this rezoning process will work, that Bluff Park will not be impacted in some measure. Hopefully nominally. I'm not here to predict how much, but I am here to tell you the truth, and that is there will be an impact. Okay? Honest.
My name is T.C. Goodwin. I have children at Green Valley, Simmons, and Hoover High. You didn't give the numbers on Hoover High. Is there any chance that there will be rezoning within the community to move on to Spalding Park?
So let me share with you Hoover High School. Maximum capacity at Hoover High School is 3,288. The optimal capacity is 2,959. Our enrollment is currently at 2,887. And so that's 87.8% of maximum capacity, and of optimal capacity, 97.6% at optimal capacity. So those are our numbers for Hoover High School. Spain Park, 2,084 maximum capacity, 1,875 optimal. Currently, the enrollment is 1,652, which puts us at 79.3% maximum capacity and 88.1% optimal capacity. I'm sorry, I can't hear you. Do I have any projections for 5 or 10 years? I don't. I have no way. I mean, it would be speculative guesswork. There's no way for me to know that. We certainly do know that there are certain areas that's already been zoned for multi-family dwellings. We know that there are other areas that's already been zoned for single-family dwellings. And so we're trying to watch that and track that. The city has shared some information with me, Mr. House. Some of our builders have shared some of their thoughts and plans with us, and we're trying to sponge and absorb as much of that as we can, but I would only be guessing if I tried to talk 5 to 10 years away. Which numbers? For the 2 high schools? Yes. Okay, so the 2 high schools, again, Hoover High School, maximum capacity would be 3,288 students. Optimal capacity would be 2,959. The enrollment at Hoover High School currently 2,887. The percentage of maximum capacity at Hoover High School is 87.8%, and the percent of optimal capacity is 97.6%. For Spain Park, maximum capacity is 2,084. The optimal capacity is 1,875. The enrollment is 1,652. Percent of maximum capacity is 79.3%, and the percent of optimal capacity is 88.1%. And we'll post this on that resources site. I realize I'm rattling numbers, and for those of you who are like me visual, I need to look at it. So I know some of you are writing it down, but we'll also post that up. Jason, wherever you are, let's get that posted up if it's not already there. Okay? Yes, sir.
I'm Rory Fowler. I have a child at Bluff Park. Is in 1st grade, and I have one that will be starting Bluff Park in a couple of years. And to go a little further, I went to the Hoover school system from kindergarten through 12th grade. And outside of college and 2 years in Decatur, I've spent my whole life here at Hoover. So when my wife and I decided to move back and start our family, we chose Hoover primarily because of the diversity that it provided in comparison to some of the other school systems. We felt like it was important for our kids to grow up with people who are somewhat different from them, because we feel like that's what real life is, and we wanted to get that education started at a young age. But when we chose where we wanted to live in Hoover, we chose Bluff Park for a very specific reason, and to go off of what Julian said earlier, that was the stability that Bluff Park provided, and the fact that we could put our kids in the school and run them through the school system all the way until they graduated with the same kids that they were with from kindergarten. Not all of them, of course, but a large majority of them. And one of the reasons I was so adamant about that was, and there's plenty of people I think in this building that went to school with me. I was a very good academic student, but I was anything but outside of class. But by the time I was in high school, my parents had built relationships with people, my friends' parents, to where I had a parent extension that kept me in line when my parents weren't around. But that can only be done if our kids are together for 10 to 12 years and to build that trust with those other families. So I guess our concern is, and you answered my question a little bit, was there's no guarantee that this isn't going to happen again 2, 3, or 5 years down the road. And I hope there's some city council members sitting here listening to this. But I don't want to speak for everybody, but obviously the turnout from Bluff Park Elementary tells you that I'm probably not alone in that theory. We're just my family is of the strong belief that part of a kid's success growing up is the relationships they build at a very young age and continue all the way throughout their life. And today I still talk to people that I've been going to school with since I was 5 years old. I talk to them today on the phone, just randomly. And I feel like that's a big part of my support system today, and I want my kids to have that. And I feel like some of Hoover, not necessarily for education, but Hoover as a whole, whether it's the city and the city council and also the Board of Education and the DOJ is starting to put some of that in jeopardy. And it concerns me on what the decisions of residents will be in relation to if the stability can't be locked down long term. Some of the decisions some of us will have to make to decide if the stability is more important than staying here within the city of Hoover. And so I just wanted to point that out.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Well, as she mentioned, my name is Colton Matthews. Two kids that left Hoover, grown-ups now. Got one at Hoover High School. I got two at Bluff Park. When this meeting was set up, the Facebook scuttlebutt started cranking up. From previous discussion, there was talk of the middle school being shifted to Spain Park. She was asking about that. We didn't really hear. That sort of thing is on the table. We're hoping, I know that Spain Park is a good school. I'm not concerned about that. But I hope there's a thought put in process about it's a 30-minute drive for new drivers. 12 minutes, roughly, from our house to Hoover High School. It takes them about 45 minutes transit time on the bus to go the same distance. I can imagine what a 30-minute transit time in a car would be on the bus for those students that rely on that. So I guess I want to put that up, make sure that that's understood and thought about as these people.
Yes. And certainly very sensitive to the traffic and to the distance. For me, the whole traffic thing has been a new experience coming from Monroe County, Beaufort County to Birmingham to Hoover. One of the things that I really had to adjust is making sure I planned the time. And so I was challenged in an earlier, politely challenged in an earlier community meeting. Go out and see what this feels like, particularly during rush hour, getting in and out of the school in the mornings. Go in the afternoon, see what this feels like. And I have been doing some of that. I've been out to several of our schools, going out to faculty meetings in the afternoon. I've got the good dose of what that feels like. But I also understand your concern about the distance one would have to travel. And again, that's why we've talked about how important it is to have a community school and why it's so important to have that contiguous area around that school to stay as a community school. So I hope at the end you will not be disappointed. We'll be very reflective about time and travel. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Amy Briggs. I have a daughter who's a fourth grader at Gwen, a daughter who's a kindergartner at Gwen, and a son who will eventually be at Gwen. He's 2, so I can figure out how long that is. I have copies, so that y'all don't have to note take everything I say. Last year when we originally started the rezoning talks, there was talk of moving part of Gwen to Trace Crossings. And the first sheet here shows, and this would also apply to Bluff Park and Green Valley Elementary, the impact the change would have if you moved us to Trace Crossings. Instead of going from a K-5 school, you're moving us to a K-4, a 5th and 6th, 7th and 8th school, so you're disrupting the entire flow. I won't take up all the time to go through it, but it outlines it here of how many one-year classes you're going to have, which isn't good for the continuity of community that we've been talking about. It breaks up those Bluff Park kids where they have 1 year at Trace Crossings and then 1 year at Brock's Gap, and it doesn't flow right. Whereas if you just rezone the Deer Valley, the South Shades Crest, the kids that are already in the K-4 classes, you're not changing them around. Also, Simmons, according to your numbers, Simmons is already well below their optimal capacity. So if you start pulling us out and having us going somewhere other than Simmons, you're going to reduce Simmons numbers, and there's not more on the other side to pull into Simmons. So that's negatively impacting Simmons. Another thing that was brought up last time was, as we talked about bringing communities together, is to pull out the community of Lake Crest out of Gwen. Just Lake Crest as a whole, pull it out and move it to Trace Crossings. For Gwen, half of our PTO is made up of Lake Crest parents. Our PTO is what raises all of our money, and they're very good at what they do. We had over $40,000 raised to build the playground. Without those Lake Crest moms and Lake Crest parents and they're working, we don't have a PTO. The Lake Coast kids make up 22% of Gwynn and 10% of Simmons. We're not overpopulated in either area, so you're taking out a huge chunk of our student capacity, and there's not enough Bluff Park people to come fill us in. Bluff Park's already going to Simmons. It's not going to affect us to help our school. Our student-to-teacher ratios are already some of the lowest in the county, in the state, and we already have minority populations of 30%. We have a minority principal. We're already qualified as Title I schools. We don't need to change our mix-up. So we would ask that you would leave Bluff Park and Gwynn out of the equation. Bluff Park has their community. Gwynn has the right mixture. We're in the right place. And adjust the schools that are overcrowded and severely overcrowded, and leave us on our side of the tracks to follow our meetings before you just pass down law, because that doesn't work for any of us. And I wanted to, with that GIS program you were talking about earlier, does it know the ages of the kids in the households?
Yes. So it knows the grade level, which school zoned, and the racial composition.
Does it account for the planned growth that's already in process, like the new houses being built in the preserve, the new houses being built by Target?
It only current filled homes, so there's no projection as a project goes up how many children might be in that home or in that multi.
Where does it get its information? Like, I haven't told anybody about it to you.
Yeah.
So
yeah. So it.
Right, but how do they know I have a 2-year-old?
It actually connects into our data system. So our data system has all of our student addresses, racial compositions, all the critical profile information. It connects to our program and then populates in the city.
But it can't project for what's coming.
No, it's not
school age.
Not a projection tool. No.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Good evening.
Hi.
My name is Monica Dobbins. I'm a parent of a child at River Chase Elementary. I'm already double booked on Thursday, so I came to tonight's meeting and we don't mind. I bring concerns from River Chase, but I wanted to first say thank you for the transparency of these meetings. I really appreciate it. I've advocated over the past 2 years on behalf of students who live in multifamily dwellings. My biggest concern during the last rezoning proposal was that it really ended up, after all was said and done, being mostly multifamily students. And that concerned me because that negatively and disproportionately impacts students of color and also students who are low income. And that can be a real problem for Hoover as we try to develop our economic diversity and our economic future. So I want to express confidence in you, Dr. Murphy, that you'll keep that in mind as we go forward in this rezoning proposal. My question, as it refers to River Chase, is that now, and to Greystone also, now we have Grandview Medical Center. That looks like that could bring some growth into that part of town, and so I'd like to know if you have any information on how that will affect those 2 elementary schools.
I don't, I deal with that 280 traffic all the time, and certainly after the new hospital has opened, I feel the pain of the additional traffic there. As far as me knowing how that hospital complex itself will impact us, I don't know that. What I do know is, as it relates to the Greystone area, our city council last night annexed 103 acres near the Greystone community, so that will have some impact as that community is developed. I know that there has been some conversation about other multi-family dwellings, and that will impact us. And so, again, we will track and trace and follow those builders and those plans for construction and that annexation, because very clearly we get the impact it's going to have on us. What we can't possibly afford to do is to outgrow ourselves in terms of being able to facilitate the education of all of our children. So we will be very engaged and hopefully very much at the table, understanding the process and being able to share our thoughts in the course of that. Okay, thank you for your comment. Yes, ma'am?
I'm Catherine Borski, and I have two students, a 10th grader at Hoover High School and an 8th grader at Simmons Middle School, both of which went to Green Valley Elementary, as did I. I went with the other gentleman, kindergarten through 12th grade here in Hoover. And I've got to say, my opinion is there's not a bad school in Hoover. I think we have fantastic schools across the board, excellent teachers. And it's all been a good experience for us so far, but my children are involved in clubs and academics and athletics where they go now. And like I said, I have 8th and 10th graders. So my concerns, my personal concerns right now are, if the changes next year involve a Spain Park rezone, will that impact the current students in the high school? And will it impact, if it impacts the 8th graders coming up, will it impact the sibling of a current student in high school? That, do you see what I'm saying? I want a freshman and a junior. So I need to know if I need to move somewhere to make sure they're at the same school.
Yeah. Well, again, that kind of takes us to the conversation about grandfathering some of our students. And anytime you start talking about grandfathering students who are already at a high school and allow them to stay there, then immediately the conversation goes to, but what about the middle school kids who just have one more year at that middle school? If you move them, why not grandfather them? Then you step down to the elementary piece and they just have one more year at that elementary school, and if you move them 1 year, then you move them, so
Exactly.
you've got that whole,
So grandfather them all the way down.
that whole process where children will be impacted. I am very sensitive to the fact that we have students who are already at high schools and feel some great reluctance to lift those students from A high school to shift them to B high school. But then in saying that about the secondary level, I always have people who step me back all the way down to the elementary school.
My goal would be if children are going to be in school at the same time. If I had a kindergartner and a 10th grader, this would not be on the table as a question. I'm talking about two children that have been in the same school other than 2 years each. I had them close together on purpose so they could grow up together. And he's driving, so he could drive her, and it wouldn't make any sense at all. Number one, it wouldn't make any sense to send my child to Spain Park driving on the interstate from where he is now. But that's another issue. Certainly wouldn't make sense if they're in the school. You could grandfather to a point where we're talking about kids that are currently there down to kids that will be there at the same time. You could have a window. I don't disagree with him that he may want them to go. As we said, the 3 schools my children have attended and still attend are well under capacity, optimal capacity, not maximum. So I don't see how it would be an issue to keep them there.
The problem is, as you impact one school, the domino effect of that is it would relate to how it rolls out into the school district. But I will say to you that we've already given great thought and conversation to the whole concept of grandfathering. And I can't look at you right now and say we have your situation exactly remedied. We hear the concern, we're sensitive to the concern, and hopefully this will not be an issue for you. No way I can look you in the face and say, I promise you 100% you're going to be happy. I can't.
I understand.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Penny, and I'm a former student at Bluff Park, Simmons, Missouri. I've had a child go through Bluff Park, Simmons, and he's at Hoover now, which is basically my alma mater. I have another child that's going to come up, and I want him to follow that same pattern. Mine has to do with tradition, living in Bluff Park. I live in the heart of Bluff Park, so you said the course, I'm thinking, I'm safe. I pray to God I'm safe, because I want my children to follow my footsteps there. But as far as the transportation you're talking about, from here to Spain Park, I would like for you to take that ride with one woman, as I do every day to drive to Spain Park to work. It's scary. I see a bus get on that overpass, my heart sinks. I get on that overpass and I'm hanging on, okay? And not only drive over it, step back, take a look at how high that overpass is, and for children to go over. safe.
End of the day,
Will you do that for me? Will you take that drive one morning from Black Park to Spanish?
Sure, I will. I'll
To
do it.
Berry?
I'm
And
ready.
step back and look at that overpass, please. It's humongous.
I promise you'll do that.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Kyle. I have 2 kids at Bluff Park, and I just pile on the Spank Park question. I mean, just a quick Googling, Google Maps, we're closer to half a dozen other high schools than we are Spank Park. So, but my question is about that travel time. Are there guidelines on how early you can begin bus pickup? Because I really would be curious how early our kids would have to be on the bus to get all the way to Spank Park.
I don't know that the state has Melody's here with me, we'll pitch it out to her, who deals more with transportation. But I'm not aware of the State Department having a time frame. You can't start rolling a bus into X period of time. You know, obviously, we want to minimize the amount of time that you're on the bus. But I don't know of any particular time you can't start that bus until.
Do you have any inclination personally on what you think is reasonable?
Reasonable to start rolling buses. Depends on when the school starts. You would like to think no child would have to be on the bus more than 30 minutes, but that's in an ideal world. I know that we have children who are on there much longer than that, and I regret that, but that is currently even true.
And you mentioned growth on the west side. Is there any discussion, given that the 2 high schools are at about 80% capacity, is there any discussion of building something further west?
Yeah. In terms of high school in particular, you know, we've been open, I've been open to all kinds of conversations. I've heard conversations about the need for a 3rd high school. I've heard conversations about maintaining the old Berry property for the purposes of perhaps taking all those buildings down and reconstructing a 3rd high school. So I think the thing that I would say to you really before we start talking about building as taxpayers, I would think the first critical thing would be for me to be able to look at the public and say, we're maximizing all of our facilities well, and here's where we are, and we've outgrown ourselves, and we now need to give thought to building a 3rd high school or whatever that school might be. So am I open to any needs for us to have future conversations about let's maximize use of our buildings and then have conversations about building? Absolutely.
At 80% capacity now, it's time to either talk about building or new or building more at the current high schools. I mean, it takes a while to build things in the public space.
Absolutely. And so, you know, we're having a very transparent conversation, so let's have it. The fact of the matter is that it costs us $13 million every month to operate the Hoover City Schools. And we've been blessed in that we had the Jefferson County 1% sales tax money, the 65 plus million that came to us, I believe, in 2008. And so we've had that revenue fund there available for us. And we have, I believe, been very good stewards of that money, but it has been necessary for us to tap into that reserve of money over the period of years. And so when you think of a school district this large, every month $13 million to keep us operational, that's a lot of money. And the fact of the matter is, to talk about rebuilding, we would have to have some serious conversation about what that revenue stream would be. Where is it going to come from? What does that support look like? As you all know, when you're talking about funding school districts, you basically have 3 sources of funds. Sales tax. Please stop by somewhere tonight and pick up something to eat before you go home. So sales tax helps our schools. Our state income tax supports our school district. And then you have your ad valorem tax, your property tax. And so sometimes even when you look at property tax, you have people who are exempt, large landowners who are exempt, and so that impacts our ad valorem. We have one of the lowest ad valorem tax bases in the nation here in Alabama. all those things impact us. And you know, I've said this in every school, so those of you who heard me talk about this earlier today, it's kind of like my own personal checkbook. So I might have a savings account, but the more negatives I go down over the course of months and years taking out of that, trying to sustain myself, my family, in this case the Hoover City Schools, you know, that money starts to decline over time, and that impact is real. It is a place where we are. We're not going broke. I'm not saying that to you. I am saying it costs us $13 million every month to operate this school district. The state expects us to have at least 1 month's operating budget. We certainly have in excess of that. But we can't continue to present, I can't continue to present to our board a deficit budget for ongoing periods of time until that subtraction catches up with us and it's, you know, net zero or negative. So one or two things have to happen. It's pretty simple math. Well, the sharpest kid in the math class, but I have this one figured out. We either have to add more revenue or we're going to have to significantly begin to look at us and decide what's important to us as Hoover. Do we like all the extra programs and opportunities and activities and foreign languages, smaller classroom sizes? Are those the things that make us uniquely Hoover? Is that something that's important to us? And if it is, and we can't cut that level of spending out, then there's no other option other than have an additional stream of revenue. So you're either going to cut what you're spending, and when you talk about cut what you're spending, you're talking about cutting programs, decreasing personnel. I mean, you got to save it somewhere. You're not going to save it by just flipping all the lights off while we're at 30-minute lunch, although that'll help. It is one of those things where we either have to have an additional stream of revenue and or we're going to have to take significant cuts in the school district. My fear in saying that to you is some of the things that make us Hoover are not the things we want to have to cut and lose. Okay?
Yeah, I mean, it's not a solution, but I understand the problem.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, yes, sir?
My name's Doug Cole. I have two sons at Glen Elementary and a daughter there soon, hopefully. He kind of asked the question I was going to ask, but I did want to clarify one thing earlier. You said that 84% was kind of the number that y'all were looking for from an optimal standpoint?
Actually, if you look at our school district and we had a fair distribution of all of our students, each of our schools would be at about 84% capacity.
Okay.
Not so much that we need to get everybody right there or we can't exceed that. That's just where we would be if we had a fair distribution at this current time with our enrollment.
It's kind of happy.
Yes, that's
Okay.
right.
So Hoover High School, I understand part of both over that 84%. And I think we all agree, I mean, growth is going to continue to come, whether we want to think it or not. I mean, I've been here about 12 years, 13 years, and it's grown tremendously in that time, and I imagine it's going to continue to grow. So I think, you know, to the previous gentleman's question, I mean, I think the current high schools that we have are going to be well beyond that optimal number, even if you do start to reshifting. So I would be in favor of a third high school. And I guess just out of curiosity, and I'll kind of ask the crowd just out of curiosity, increased revenue is something, I'm not one that likes additional taxes, but if it means impacting my child, how many that's probably a realistic conversation that we as residents of Hoover, regardless if you're in Bluff Park or Gwen or wherever, that we probably need to be having with our city councilman. I mean, we're obviously, you're in charge of the school board, and the school board, is in charge of maintaining schools, but the city council plays a big role in this, and I think that we need to start applying some pressure to the city council. Some city council meetings and, getting our voice out there. So I thank you for taking on kind of hard task. Good luck.
Kind of lines with root canal.
Yeah. Good luck.
Thank you, thank you.
Hello, I'm Kathy Lamb. I have an 11th grader at Hoover, 2 6th graders at Simmons, and a kindergartner at Bluff Park. A couple of my questions were already answered, but I'd like to ask the school capacities. Thank you for providing those. Could you put all of them on the website?
We sure will, and we'll get that up first thing in the morning. We sure will.
And the small group that you mentioned that would be meeting with the boards later on, is that the group of parent leaders and faculty members?
Yes, I've asked each principal to give me 2 or 3 names of representatives from the community and or the PTO and maybe one from their school. So the request was, would you sit down and meet with us in a smaller group? And to accommodate that, we reached out to principals to say, give us 2 or 3 folks. Maybe a good mix of that would be, you know, a PTO and a teacher and another community person. So I'm deferring to our principals, and I think some of them are already underway making those selections.
Good, thank you. As far as, I'm mostly concerned with the high school piece, and we've all talked about the driving. There are multiple ways to get there, so I would ask when you do drive, take 65 to 459, get off on Active. Go down 31 to Valleydale. Do the different ways that some of us might end up going, if you could look at that as well.
Yes.
I apologize, Monica, if this is against what you were trying to accomplish, but if you could look at some of the apartment complexes, because you've mentioned that you want to keep the students in contiguous areas, but when you look at where the apartment complexes, they are already pulled in weird, well, I don't want to use an adjective, but they're pulled in ways that don't seem to make obvious sense. You've got those that all go down Warner Road, and for example, Park at Galleria is pulled and goes to South Shades Crest, and then Park at Deer Valley goes to Rocky Ridge, and they're almost right next to each other. So if you could kind of look at maybe straightening those out, that may give you a way to feed some more students over to the Spade Park that are a little bit closer than we are here at, well, it's kind of in Green Valleys already, but the house is in Green Valley and those of us in Bluff Park. And maybe those apartment folks might stay in the apartment areas a little bit longer if they're not shuffled around every couple of years because of the flux and flow that happens with them. So maybe everybody on the west side of Lorna can shift over to Spain Park, something that just may make more sense to them as well as us. And I think that was all I had. Thank you.
And not that I think she suggested otherwise, I just, kind of feel like it's important for me to say to you that regardless of where our children come from, whether they come from a single-family dwelling home or whether they come from a multi-family complex, we want to do the best for every one of those children. With all due respect for all of them.
My name is Ron McCarthy. I've lived in Nick for about 18 years. I have a first grader at Bluff Park. I'm in a unique position. Last year in the rezoning, I lived in Lakecrest. So my son went to Gwen last year. It's at Bluff Park this year. First off, can't go wrong with school. Both of them came to leave Gwen. So I'm not really worried about that. But definitely want to point out one thing that's unique about Bluff Park moving there is anywhere you ask someone in Hoover where they live, they name the subdivision. And Bluff Park is really the only place it's named to the community. And so it will be kind of strange if we happen to live on the outskirts where we may be rezoned back to Gwen, which I'm happy going there, but then also when you tie yourself to a community, but you're not part of the school, and it just feel like are you really part of Bluff Park? And so it's kind of not just there, because again, usually it's a subdivision, it's Lakecrest, they were going to move all of Lakecrest together. And you kind of lived in Lakecrest for 8 years, you were part of Lakecrest, and so you kind of just tie yourself to that. And so there's some of that concern with where you draw the lines of moving Bluff Park out, is you are kind of moving people from the community, not just through the school, because there aren't really the subdivisions there to say, hey, let's move this neighborhood, people associate themselves differently. So I want you to understand the mindset that people have is a little bit different. There, and also during the last rezoning, I never got good answers. Basically, they kept wanting to move Lakecrest over into Trace Crossings, but never really how they refill when. And just again, like I mentioned before, you may take some students from Bluff Park, I can't take that many, but we never got any answers from Andy Craig last time on what would actually refill Gwen, because we might not be in the situation where we go from Bluff Park back to Gwen, and then where all Gwen students going to go if you end up taking away a big subdivision like Lakecrest or something like that.
So let's do this. Once we have that plan together, if that's still a question that's on the table, then that's certainly one we'll need to answer. But to try to respond to what that looked like, that was a plan that I'm really not at all familiar with, I can't answer that. But certainly when we put our plan in front of you, whatever questions you have, we'll answer them.
It did sound like I've seen some numbers but it did seem like there Simmons numbers, fine, capacity-wise, everything like that, is that correct? There really aren't any issues with Simmons, though, so really it could be an option to leave the feeder schools in the Simmons the way they are, both of those seem to were, and Love Park maybe a little bit higher, but they were thinning out, and then the middle school's already fine. To still consider just leaving this section, there's not really an issue there, because also as you pull people away, there's not really a good way to send students back into this area.
I respect what you're saying, and I hear you, but I will be very clear again. I am not optimistic that Bluff Park will not be impacted by this rezoning. But I hear you.
Okay.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Joe Langston. I have a first grader at Green Valley and attended a 2-year-old, hopefully that will attend the same path. A couple of questions I wanted to ask. As you're doing the analysis with your GIS system, I don't think we should use a plan that doesn't have projections, because you can do projections. You might not have data. Commissions on what they've approved for builders to do, multifamily apartment complexes, new home subdivisions. You can do the analysis on the current ones that have been done over the last 5 years. How many of those homes, what percentages, how many kids out of them, where are they going? You can build, not an exact picture, but a good enough picture that can help with that projection. I don't think we should accept any plan that doesn't have some form of a projection, because I think you're going to off-balance yourself. We talk about, we do have a need to build another high school. It's pretty obvious by the numbers. We're going to have to do that. I do think that we shouldn't be the ones footing most of that burden. These people that are building these complexes, which are causing the growth, should be forced to pay a fee or a fine, I don't care what you call it. They should pay for the growth they're causing us to now have higher tax burdens because of the extra growth, and also the need to build these new buildings. They should absorb some of that cost. I'm sorry?
Support the infrastructure.
Yeah, support the infrastructure. You're putting a stress on the infrastructure. You should pay for it, or at least help pay for it. As you're going through and doing your analysis on how, like you say, you can set concentric circles around to look where are the right boundaries. As you're doing that, I know you've got to work with the DOJ, so you're looking at all these demographics. If you're looking at just pure numbers, yeah, a concentric system, you can actually make sense. Like you get to a certain area, you've got to make those hard choices where those lines fall. When you start looking at the stuff that DOJ is looking at, and you find that, hey, we've done this, the numbers balance out, but when you look at your demographics, they don't meet what they want to see. What are you going to do with that, even though the numbers in the concentric boundaries make sense? It's just that the population that's going to be there doesn't fit what they want. Are we going to adjust it, or are we going to say, well, to make that work, we got to pull from over here to make their numbers look good?
Well, as it relates to acquiring unitary status, it will be necessary for us to comply with some expectations of the DOJ to make sure that we have that representation.
Mm-hmm. Are they going to help pay for it?
Pay for it as in?
That they want those people to be in these different areas, they should, if it's going to force us to go out, if you've done your job and said, these boundaries make the numbers for the schools work, population-wise, student-teacher ratio, we're in those optimal numbers, and then they're going to come in and say, well, you don't have this, or you don't have that, and force you to have to rejig everything that doesn't make sense, or is going to make us have to pay more for something. They should have to cover that cost. If they're just want it because of their numbers, then the DOJ and the Department of Education should have to pony up and say, hey, to make that work, that means this extra cost is going to be put on the burden of these communities. We shouldn't have to absorb that either.
Don't know that I disagree with that, but I'm not optimistic we'll get that checked out.
The last thing I want to say is, and this is just purely very selfish on this statement, we made a choice to be where we are for a specific reason. We moved, I went to a very rural community school down in Jemison. I did that hour-and-a-half bus ride all the way through senior year of high school. Had very limited options. So when we adopted our kids, we were like, okay, where are we going to move? You know, if we were looking downtown, just for the two of us, we both worked downtown, it made sense. we adopted our kids, going, that's not where we want to be. So we chose Hoover. We chose Green Valley specifically. We had coworkers that had kids that went through the system, went through Simmons, went to Hoover. And we have really good feedback on that. And that's why we made the large investment that we did to buy the house we did. So I do have a lot of resentment whenever you wind up with developers that are causing this pressure and not having to absorb the fact that, quite frankly, if we get zoned for Simmons, we're moving. I'm going to go to Vestavia. I'm not going to stay here. Because I'm not going to put my kid going through that drive. I'm not going to put myself downtown and then move to Simmons. It doesn't make sense for us. So I really resent the fact that we've made this investment in the home we have to only look at it and say because of these other actions by other people, we may be forced to make a choice of moving so that we don't have to deal with these other things that they're not absorbing the cost for, and they're not the ones having to deal with day to day. So, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Kosi Abedu. I have 2 kids at BOE. I have one at Hoover High and one that came out of Hoover High. You said earlier that the reason why you do the rezoning is to meet DOJ's requirements. You said something in reference to offering minority kids the ability to go into some gifted program and stuff like that that you're going to have to meet. Did the DOJ give you guys certain criteria that you have to meet as far as recruitment, numbers? How is this going to be measured? Is there a systematic ratio that you have to meet for minority and stuff like that? So that's my question.
Yes, so the Department of Justice looks at the number of minority children we have and choose for us or wish for us to have a proportionate number based on that population of students represented in those higher academic opportunities. I'm going to jump ship just a little bit, but bring you back. One of the things that I asked the Department of Justice when they met with us a couple of weeks ago was this. We have minority students who are very happy about where they are. It's working for them. And so one of the things that we'll be doing for or to some of those students is saying, look, I've got a better deal for you. I'm going to move you from where you're going. I realize you're perfectly happy. I realize your family likes this school, but we're going to move you. My question to them is, while we're trying to address and good Southern term fix this, we may be leaving our minority community very unhappy about the fact that we know best for you, so we're going to move you and your family, and they're perfectly content with the locations that they're in. So I posed that question to them. I can't say to you that I heard an answer that satisfied my question. But, you know, sometimes we believe we're addressing things and making it better for children, and sometimes, frankly, we may not be, to include our minority children.
Absolutely, because my daughter, she's going, like I said, and she's in one of those programs, so I'm happy that she's in that program. But then also, I don't know the ratio of how many minority kids are in that program. So, you know, if one of the requirements is to get more of them in there, you know, so that we know it can be measured, you know, yeah, this many minority kids who qualify, you know, we're going to be able to perform to be in the program. So is there a systematic process to get them in and can it be measured? Thank you.
Thank you. So, you know, the Department of Justice really wants us to make sure that not only do we have a recruitment plan for recruiting highly qualified minority teachers, but that we're preparing our minority students to go into those challenging academic experiences and looking for a proportionate number of our minority students to be in those classes. Okay? Yes, sir.
My name is Brandon Lee. I have a first grader at Bluff Park, and I will have a kindergartner starting next year. I am a third generation from Bluff Park, as my children will be the fourth. The guy before me kind of stole my thunder about how can we even talk about this with no future projections. That's totally asinine to me. Second of all, I went to Bluff Park. I went to the original Bluff Park, which is still standing. If, from all the figures you've said tonight, Bluff Park is what you consider overcrowded. If it is overcrowded, have we looked at what we could do to the old Bluff Park to maybe add on to the current Bluff Park? Has that even been looked at, talked about, thought about?
We have not looked at enlarging Bluff Park Elementary School, no.
Before we were ever considered rezoning, could that be looked at? And, you know, if it's a cost, obviously, bring that up to the community. You know, Bluff Park is an extremely tight community. I, for one, would be more than willing to pay for a school expansion in our community before I rezone my children to go somewhere else. And my final question, did the DOJ come to Hoover and make it known that this has to be changed?
Well, the school district is seeking unitary status, and what that means is we want to get the DOJ out of our business. So when we get ready to sell a piece of property, for example, when we're having conversations about the possible sale of the Old Berry property, the Department of Justice had a position to take in that the students who attended that school through our Crossroads program, Second Chance program, a number of those students were minority students, so their question was, so if you sell the school, close the school, where are those students going to go? I'm giving that to you as an example to say, I want the Department of Justice out of our business, and the way that we get the Department of Justice out of our business is to address these green factors. Otherwise, if we just thumb our nose at the whole unitary status, they're going to be forever stymieing our progress, potentially, because they have the right to say to us, you don't, have enough minority children here, or this facility, or that bus, or those 6 growth factors will forever be there to be addressed by us, and for the growth of our school district and our decision-making to be hampered by that process.
And my final question is, on our side of the tracks, you could say, the Ross Bridge area is the one that's just booming. Does it not make sense to have a school to take care of some of that growth?
And certainly that has been a conversation, and we're looking at all that. Not only that, we're looking, and no one said this tonight, but we're actually looked at reconfiguring grade levels. We're looking at everything.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay, yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Chris Meyer. I have a third grader and a second grader at Queen, and 2 more that will attend Queen. 2 questions and a comment. First, I just want to make sure I understood your answer to the previous gentleman correctly. So, by going through this process, you increase the chances that the school system will achieve unitary status, and the DOJ will remove their nose from our town.
That is true, but remember again, that's our secondary reason for rezoning. But yes, what you said is accurate.
So there's a low likelihood that we would ever achieve unitary status without going through this process.
There is an expectation on the part of the Department of Justice for us to do rezoning. And in the absence of rezoning, we will be forever in hiatus, making no progress toward unitary status.
And then secondly, the second question, I'd like to pair the gentleman in the green shirt, because I leave here, I came in the room with different concerns than what I'm leaving with. And my main concern is the stickiness of the plan that ultimately is implemented. Because I think everyone would agree that going through this process multiple times is not very desirable. Towards that end, I do think that projections, future growth, et cetera, need to be a consideration. Other fast-growing communities have used impact fees on new home construction to help offset infrastructure costs. Does the city of Hoover have such a thing? And could that be a revenue stream that might help your deficit situation?
I'm not sure about impact fees, and I would defer to the city and So Jason, let's talk about that and let's try to post an answer up on our resources for you.
And my last point is simply a comment and concerns the high school. Like everyone, I'm very wary about a drive to Spain Park, but I will say that in the final analysis, I think I will gauge any plan that is presented by the educational opportunities that my children could receive. And towards that end, I will say that I'm perhaps equally wary about the potential of sending them to Hoover High School that is substantially larger than what exists today, or sending them to a third high school or a new high school if there isn't sufficient time to get that facility up and running into the standard that the other two high schools are at today.
And you're making the point well, and that is, you know, I'm not sure if Hoover is interested in us having a school that doesn't look like Hoover High School in Spain Park. That whole 7A concept or larger school. And so, you know, those are some of the things that we've talked about. Is it possible to build a third high school? But certainly the assumption would be all the same opportunities and experience and dare I say, a bit of grandeur about how we do that. And so those are all considerations. Okay? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Georgia Pearson. I have two children at Love Park Elementary School. I'm the current PTO president, and I know that I just wanted to ask a question and maybe see if there's any way that we could be helpful. The current numbers that we have on maximum capacity and optimal capacity, are we just using this year's data?
Yes.
And is the reason for that because I know that you had said we need to get prepared, we need to go ahead and do this. You know, we need people to be making their decisions in the spring. Is it a time issue that we have that we're not gathering this data to look into the future and using that to base our decisions?
Well, so we have some of the data as it relates to some of the projected buildings. You know, in some of those cases is that 2 years before someone would be moving into that. So we are not just, I don't want to suggest to you that we've had no conversations. We're completely ignorant of any possible build out. But the numbers we've shared are real numbers based on current enrollment. But we are aware and we're very watchful of what's being annexed, what's being approved, what's already been approved. Signature Homes came by my office, talked and shared with me one day. So definitely there's some conversation about what the future might look like. Very speculative, but yeah, we have some thoughts and some ideas about projections.
Well, one thing that I would offer up is that I know there's always, and we were talking about GIS, there's always a need at universities for projects, and they can happen pretty quickly. So if we were in a time crunch but really wanted to have more robust data to make this decision on, we could probably partner with some universities and see if they could help us, because I know I'm actually have a lot of experience with ArcGIS, and I know that you can use that to make projections into the future. So if we needed that data and it was just a time issue or a resources issue, maybe we could get creative and work with some of our local universities to get some of that data that we know is out there and put it into our ArcGIS programs to really help us make a good decision that will last into the future rather than looking at 1 year's worth of data.
And I do know that our city has some of those projections and some of those possibilities, and we will absolutely collaborate and work with our city on those too. Hi.
I'm Julie Elmore. I'm a teacher at Love Park Elementary. I also have children. I have 2 children at Hoover High School and a child
I teach because I love your children. And hopefully all the teachers that they have are there for that reason. So I urge you as parents to please be cautious as you go home. It's a very heated, obviously, topic for all of us because we're passionate about our children. But when you go home with negative attitudes and you feed that into your family, that makes my job as your child's teacher that much harder when they bring that negative impact into our classroom. So please be careful and mindful of what you say in front of your children and to your children about this process. Thank you.
And that was also a point that we talked about at Buff Park. And you know, we also took ownership of that as school personnel. We said how we accept this as school personnel and how we approach those conversations. And certainly, hopefully extremely mindful about the professionalism that has to go into children hearing us converse about, hey, what if I'm not here next year teaching? And so we respect your role as parents and encourage your conversations to be positive or out of earshot, but we also accept that same responsibility, so thank you for that too. So we're approaching 8 o'clock, and so if you have a question, if you'll go ahead and come to the mic, and we'll certainly try not to leave anybody unanswered, so if you'll make your way to the mic. Yes, sir. Oh, okay. Yes.
My name is Shannon Van. I have a second grader and a kindergartner at Bluff Park, and it's very obvious that we're very passionate about this, and one reason that I think we're so emotional about it is because how it was handled previously. And so I'd like to say thank you to you not only for the transparency in the process, but also the respect that you're using to treat this process. I realize that you can't make everybody happy. You've said that several times. I think we all understand that. We're all just really hoping that we're not the person that gets made unhappy.
And resigning is great as long as it doesn't we actually had somebody who almost said that verbatim in another meeting. It's fine, just don't let it affect you.
Right, and I think one reason that I say that you're treating us with respect is because I live in an area of Bluff Park, and I think that Stephen mentioned this earlier, that we're sort of a community and not really a grouping of neighborhoods, and so it's hard to describe the areas of the community. And the street that I live on and that several of my friends and my kids' friends live on is in an area that was originally called the Farley Road area. And that was really disrespectful to us because we found out that no one had driven through our area. Nobody understood what the streets in the neighborhoods looked like. And one thing that was said was just that Farley Road area. And if you really look at Bluff Park, there are Farleys that end in Place and Road and Terrace all throughout the community. And if you stand in my front yard and you look one way, you can see Farley Road. I live on Farley Place. And if you look to the left, you see a sign that is entrance to our neighborhood, which is not a neighborhood in the traditional sense. There is no homeowners association. We consider people who aren't in our neighborhood, but it's called Bluff Park Acres. And I made this point the last time. I live probably on closer to the outside of the skirts of what you're going to consider to keep in Bluff Park, but my house was built in 1957, so we've been there for a minute. Not me, obviously, but the house has. And that area is considered Bluff Park Acres. So when you're considering what is the community, I think that's an important thing, which is one of the reasons that when the first plan was presented to us, surprise, I did drive everything, just like several parents have asked you to do. And I was part of the original plan that was going to move to another elementary school. And I had a really hard time figuring out how I was going to explain to my children, we live in Bluff Park and we live in Bluff Park Acres, but you're not going to go to Bluff Park. And so not only did I map it, but I drove it. And so it was very clear very quickly that not only would I impact traffic, but I would also impact transportation because I live within 2 miles of Bluff Park, therefore no bus service to my house. But the school we were going to be moved to, I lived farther than 2 miles out, so it was going to impact the bus situation as well. And so that's going to make different impacts to whatever plan you have. And then I grew up off of Valleydale Road, not in Hoover like several people have talked about, in unincorporated Shelby County with Shelby County Schools. And when Spain Park was originally built, we all sort of scratched our heads. It didn't make sense to us because it seemed so far from Hoover. And said was going to move to Spain Park. And my husband works at our church right behind there. The campus of our church touches the campus of Spain Park. And I know how long it takes him to get to work every morning. And I know the dangerous interstates that he drives. And I can't imagine putting our children on that drive. And so I did map it and I drove it. And it was at least twice as long on a Sunday morning when there was no traffic to get from my house to Spain Park compared to how long it took to get to Hoover. So I know that several people have said that, but I want to make the point again that we really do need to think about that when we move kids around to high schools. Again, thank you for how you're training the process.
Okay, I'm Matt Davis. I have a daughter in 4th grade at Bluff Park, one that will be in kindergarten next year. A quick comment and then a question about the numbers, right? So a lot of what we talked about is around the numbers, and I know there's many more factors that play into that. So maybe oversimplifying, but last year Dr. Craig visited, tried to explain some of this to us, and brought up a spreadsheet, kind of a working spreadsheet that would show the number of classrooms, maybe the classes coming in and going out, that sort of thing. And my main takeaway from that meeting was he was basing everything on that Bluff Park is overcrowded, you know. But then he would take, say, like a science lab or a utility room and change it to a classroom, and then maybe a smaller class comes in, and then wow, now we're not overcrowded, we're actually in the ideal zone, right? So again, I'm probably oversimplifying, but my question really is, where are these numbers actually being generated from? Are they from the number of classrooms or some other place? And then has there been any consideration to, can we take, and you know, this is an unpopular comment, but take like a science lab and turn it into a classroom, because for me, I would think that would be the lesser of two evils.
Yes, so we do have that, and we will post that on tomorrow, Jason. The analysis that we have actually has how many classrooms in each school. So we'll post that up, but if you have questions, just call me, but we'll make sure all that's up. But yes, that is how we're determining or analyzing capacity, is how much space do we have, how many classrooms do we have.
Yeah, so has there been any consideration about taking, you know, other rooms and changing them to classrooms so their capacity can go up?
We've actually considered, considering a science lab, that is a classroom, so that is considered a class that would have capacity of 20 kids.
Okay. Well, thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I guess we'll swing over here. Yes, sir.
Hey, Jake Schlesy. I have a second grader in soon to be kindergarten. A couple of observations. I know you're dealing with the sins of your predecessor, and zoning deals with the sins of their predecessor, and I get that. However, I know we got some of the city council here. No one ever talks, it seems like. You don't sit on one. And the reason why I'm saying that, I live on the outer bands of Bluff Park, which would be part of your move. We came here for Hoover schools. I don't think it's a problem if we went to win or not. We love Bluff Park. But you're not fixing the problem. All I'll do is go buy a house closer to Bluff Park. I've just shifted. And then you're creating more depressed areas that, I'll call it the old Hoover, that aren't getting any of the new growth. You haven't fixed anything. If I don't want to live in this part of Bluff Park, then I'll go move to Ross Bridge. I'll go move to the Preserve. I'll go move somewhere else. So all you're doing is shifting the problem, and then the value of the home that I'm selling is probably going to go down. I mean, I can make it go down. I can sell it tomorrow for whatever I want, and then go move somewhere else. And I don't think y'all really think about those things. I mean, if my house currently sits where it is, and you tell me January 1, this is where you're going to go, I'll go look for a house closer, and I'll sell that thing for cost, below cost, because I'm going to do what's best for my child. And if it's mistaken, if it's deeper in the Bluff Park, I don't care. And that's what I think you're missing. I mean, Andy was great at stacking paper and doing numbers. And the only thing we're really asking for is a leader. And you come up with your spreadsheets, and I get it. That's part of your job, and that's how you quantify your decisions. But I don't really think y'all understand, because y'all don't speak with one voice. City council does one thing, zoning does one thing, and y'all all pass the buck. I don't sit on zoning. That's not my job. That's not my job. That's not my job. I'm tired of someone saying it's not my job. It's all of your job. Y'all represent us. And what y'all are doing is a huge impact on us. One last statement, I'll let y'all go. If you don't have a plan right now, currently, is that correct?
We do not have a plan at the current time.
And I think in the paper you said you wanted to, present it first of the year, correct? So in 6 months, you're going to tell a group of people, either sell your house, this is going to be your shift, this is going to be the shift of teachers, I got to hire new teachers for these new areas because I'm bringing in new kids. I got to make all these changes. It's going to impact you too, and all this needs to be done in 6 months. I'm not much of, forecasting 10 years out, but I do know you're putting a lot of pressure on a system that already has a lot of pressure on it, and asking it to do something in 6 months. And I know how to turn a car. I don't know what it's like to turn a $40 million school system, and I think you're putting yourself in a pinch for failure. I'm just saying. I mean, I'm not doubting your skills as a leader, but I'm just saying you're asking a lot when earlier this year y'all didn't even have a third or fourth grade teacher or a second grade teacher till like the day before school started. It wasn't even posted when everybody else, because y'all didn't know. And so y'all had a year to plan that. And now you're asking them to do it in 6 months.
So with all due respect, understand that...
without projections. You're making these decisions on today's numbers without projections. And that's... Y'all said that.
No, the numbers she shared as capacity were based on current numbers.
Well, that's what I'm saying. You're making this year's capacity, or the decision she's making is based off of current capacity, right?
Yes, we've shared with you current capacity numbers.
If next year the capacity changes and we get down to and kids graduate or go to Simmons or people move, you still may not fix your capacity, right? I guess that's what I'm saying. Because y'all aren't putting any trends or projections in there. Y'all are just, as of today, this is what it is.
Well, what we've tried to do is to share with you today what those numbers look like and how that impacts capacity. But to suggest that we would move forward in complete ignorance of what any projections are, no, that's not true.
Well, you have 3 weeks to get all of that data and make a decision and present it. I'm not saying that you can't do it. I'm just saying that's a tall task.
I realize that the timeline that we've established for ourselves is very ambitious. I'm confident that we can do that, but if we're not, I'm not so big as I can't come back to the community and say that was awfully ambitious and we're not there. But we're very committed, and one of the things that I've heard is very opposite of what you're saying, and that is we've been engaged in this process and we're either going to do it or not do it. And so we're not sitting at my office doing nothing, waiting for these meetings to expire. We're already on GIS. We're already looking at shifts. What if we did this? How might that look? I shared with you that some of our builders have been at the table with me to talk. Mr. House from the city has had conversations with us about some building projections. So there's a lot of conversations that's going on. I certainly don't want to leave you with any thoughts that...
I'm not saying that. I'm not saying we're having a conversation. I'm just saying that you're putting a lot of pressure on the system in a short amount of time, even in best case scenario. That's all I'm saying. And I would challenge you, whatever plan you do come out with, I would challenge you and the City Council zoning to speak with one common voice, because y'all will all get your food about Bluff Park if you don't have it.
My name is Becky Keeney. I have 3 children, and I am really concerned after listening to this because my children are 4 and will start at Green Valley next year if current zoning is the same. I've got a 6th grader and I have a freshman. Talking about grandfathering in when it comes to children and how that will work with the high school terrifies me, having a senior who is a freshman currently who is very, very active, where I am making multiple trips per week to the school for that child. I cannot imagine trying to spend Friday night trying to decide whether I'm going to go to a Spain Park game or whether I'm going to go to a Hoover High game, because both of my kids are involved in both of those things. If a grandfathering works out, at the same point, I can't imagine pulling a senior, to go to a different school. In addition to that, there's been a lot of talk from Bluff Park, and I know, I love you guys from Bluff Park, but we selected to move a a few years back, and we selected to stay within the Green Valley community. And that gets tossed around a lot with Bluff Park, that there is a Bluff Park community. There is a Green Valley family. And I look at it, I'm terrified because Green Valley is one of the smallest schools. So when you talk about moving, when you look at the fact that Shades Mountain is already located farther away than Green Valley is from Berry, from some of the other schools, that terrifies me when I look at the fact that I'm about 3 blocks from Simmons. I definitely don't want to look at taking a child from Green Valley, where I live, to go to Berry every day when I'm less than half a mile from there. That's silly too. And so I feel like that was always something that was in play, that Green Valley could just be plucked and selected to go somewhere else on a whim. And as a whole group, and because that we would move as a whole group, then that would make it okay. And I don't know that that makes it okay. And I am also concerned that you're looking at rezoning now to get the unitary status, and then rezoning again. By the time it's all said and done, I will have been a parent of Hoover City Schools for 25 years. That's how long my kids will have been here if we stay in the community. I feel like there needs to be something long-term for me specifically, not for necessarily the person who's living next to me who's going to sell because they're retiring and moving someplace else. We bought our house to be the last house that we lived in. I'm looking at being a Hoover resident for more than 25 years, as well as a Hoover City School mom for more than 25 years.
Thank you. I just have a brief comment to make, a suggestion. You talked about the small groups of leaders from each school. I would suggest that you have a small group of city leaders. We need a counselor, we need a person from planning and zoning, and we need another city leader in there. Because what you're hearing tonight is community. Now, I live in Bluff Park, kids go to Bluff Park, but I grew up in Shades Mountain. And I lived in Hoover 39 years. I was born and brought over here, and I've been here. This is a city-wide issue, and our city leaders need to be involved. So when we ask a question of you, that we're also asking the same question of planning and zoning of the city council. Because that's the only way that we're going to come to a resolute answer. Now we've got elections coming up next year. Some of those positions will change. But I can tell you how I feel and how a lot of these people feel. We want to be behind you to stop building houses, to stop annexing property. And having those people there to ask questions like, they were asking about how many houses are going to be impacted to build. 500 behind the Met, 500 front doors, 900 apartments behind Publix. That takes anything you do and throws it to a tailspin. They need to be here and they need to hear from the people of this city to know that we do not want to do this again in a year, 2 years, 3 years, however long it takes. Because that's how we feel, that's how this community feels, how the city feels. So please, have a small group of city leaders involved along with this ones from each school.
My name is Stephanie Williamson. I have a daughter who just graduated from Hoover High School this past year. I have an 8th grade son in Simmons Middle, and also I have a 3rd grader at Little Park Elementary. As far as the grandfathering is concerned, I don't know if you have attended any of the Bumpus Simmons football games, basketball games, anything of that nature. You will see a lot of third children up in these schools, including my daughter. And she already thinks of herself as she's going to Simmons. And how are you going to tell her with all this rezoning that, too bad, you're not going to be attending Simmons Middle School, or may not be able to, do what you want to do because of the situation. I think, that's important to think of these kids who are coming up, their children, who have had siblings, they've lived at this school, they know the teachers, they know the environment, and how are you going to, handle those children?
Thank you. Obviously, that's a parent conversation, and I appreciate how difficult that is, but but I certainly, again, can't say to you that there's not going to be an impact for us. Okay?
Yes.
Thank you. Shift over.
My name is Will Brown. Got one job at the park and two, if I can keep a lot long enough, that'll get two. I kind of had my head in the sand, obviously, and didn't know a whole lot of these issues going on until very recently. And so I don't have a ton to say about the decisions, except to focus with Love Park. And I want to comment on the process. I want to have to agree with the guy who's up there. This just seems like a very hasty, big decision to make where we don't already have any kind of idea what we're doing. We don't have projections yet, apparently, and there was some talk about any kind of projections would be speculative. I don't think anybody here was taken by surprise at the growth over the past 3 to 5 years and kind of knew where it was going. I don't think anybody was real surprised by that. So I don't think we should be surprised by future growth. And if you need help with that, I know people out on power, and those folks are paid to know where people are going to be so they can provide power. We can get information to you. So I think that trying to get a decision through of this magnitude and telling all these people to shift their lives is, in this manner, is a little hasty. I want to talk to the folks back there, the city council folks. I'm looking at this little pie chart here, and this is kind of ridiculous. I think we need to think about. I will divvy this up. Don't get me wrong. Some of these things are great. I don't know where exactly you cut. I know that you're here in part to help figure out how to trim the fat off all the Swiss, and that's awesome. I'm glad that you're involved with that. I do want to point out that a couple more impacts people haven't really talked about. There's an economic impact to Hoover to have people in the car for an extra hour and a half every day. They're working parents and have to figure out whether they could be out earning money and paying more taxes. And more important to that to me, there's a role that the family plays in education. To the extent that you've got a kid in the car or on a bus for an hour and a half or two every day, that's time you can't spend with them. And that's, with all due respect to the teachers, I love y'all. Y'all are doing a fantastic job. But we as parents have to be involved and have to help. And there's at least as much growth in their education, both outside the classroom through us, and at least as much as there is in the classroom. So we want economic opportunity for all people, but at the same time, don't diminish that in the home as a result of these decisions.
Thank you. Thank you. You're back.
I'm back. I appreciate you coming here and taking from the fire. That's not the best thing to do. You said earlier one of the priorities in rezoning is making good use of existing facilities, correct?
Yes.
I might suggest that if you look at Bluff Park, you have an elementary school operating in a very stable community, very close to 100% of the optimum capacity. To me, that sounds like an exceptional use.
I want to thank you so much for just giving us an opportunity to hear your concerns. We've heard some really important things from you tonight, and we've taken good notes. I don't think Melody's picked her head up much, and maybe Kathy has an idea, but we've taken notes. We hear you, we respect you, and I thank you for being here tonight. Thank you so much. I'll hang around and see if anyone wants to share anything. And thank you to the church. JR, thank you so much.